2 kids missing 3 years, found after a homeless man's dog entered a hidden cave in the mountains. Everyone gave up on the Parker kids. Even their parents started to grieve. But Bruno never gave up. The dog vanished into the tree line and returned with a sneaker clamped in his jaws. He dropped it at Cole's feet and refused to eat, refused to sit. He just paced toward the dark woods and howled, a sound so haunted that Cole grabbed his rifle immediately. Because a dog doesn't howl like that for the dead. He howls for the living who are trapped. The snow came down in slow, heavy sheets over the small Colorado town, soft enough to look peaceful, cold enough to remind Cole Marston of everything he had lost. The landlord didn't even meet his eyes as he taped the eviction notice to the door of the shed Cole had been renting behind the hardware store. The man just mumbled something about overdue payments and walked off. Cole didn't argue. He had nothing left to argue with. He stood there a moment, breath coiling in the frigid air, backpack slung over one shoulder, the last of his life folded into the seams. Beside him, Bruno pressed close, the German shepherd's coat dusted with snow, ears set forward with a tension that didn't match the calm of the street. "Easy," Cole muttered, rubbing behind the dog's neck. The familiar scar beneath his fingers, the one Bruno earned during their last search and rescue call, felt colder tonight. Bruno didn't ease. His muscles stayed tight, nostrils flaring towards the tree line at the far end of town. Cole followed his gaze. Dark spruce trees stood still as gravestones, buried under 3 winters' worth of silence. 3 winters since the Parker kids, Emma and Lucas, had walked into that forest and vanished without a trace. 3 winters since Cole had been part of the team searching for them. 3 winters since he'd made mistakes he never forgave himself for. He looked away first. Bruno did not. "Come on, boy. Let's go before someone calls the sheriff." They walked down Main Street, boots crunching over frozen gravel. Christmas lights flickered in a few storefronts, but the rest of town looked shuttered, worn down by storms and worry. People used to wave at Cole. After the divorce, after the business collapsed, after the Parker search failed, now they just glanced, then pretended they hadn't. Bruno stayed close to his leg. He didn't judge, didn't waver, didn't care about anything except the way Cole's heartbeat shifted when old regrets crept too deep. Cole reached his truck at the far edge of town, an old Ford he'd slept in more nights than he cared to admit. He opened the door, tossed his pack inside, and was about to help Bruno in when the dog froze again, tail straight, ears locked forward. "What now?" Cole sighed. Bruno growled. Not a warning, something sharper, something that vibrated through the cold air like a tension wire ready to snap. "Buddy, it's just the wind." But even as he said it, Cole didn't believe it. Not with Bruno's instincts, not with his history. Bruno stepped backward, then forward again, nose lifted, breathing in the air as if reading a message written for him alone. The dog's pupils tightened, his whole body leaned towards the forest. Cole felt the unease settle along his spine. "Bruno!" Another growl, then suddenly a bark, low, clipped, deliberate. It wasn't the kind of bark for strangers, or deer, or passing shadows. It was the bark he used on missions, the one that meant stop, listen, something's wrong. Cole inhaled sharply. A figure stood just beyond the last street lamp, half inside the glow, half swallowed by the swirling snow. A man, maybe, but still as stone. Cole blinked, and the figure stepped back into darkness. Gone. His first instinct was to call out. His second was to trust Bruno and stay silent. The dog strained against his collar, not to chase. Bruno didn't chase without reason. He wanted Cole to follow. "Not tonight," Cole muttered. "I'm not going back into that forest, not for ghosts." Bruno finally turned back to him, eyes burning with something that felt too human, pleading. warning, remembering. Cole's breath hitched. Bruno, whatever you think you saw, it's in the past. A lie, for both of them. He climbed into the truck. Bruno hesitated, looked at the tree line one last time, then jumped in with a frustrated huff. Cole shut the door, trying to shake off the chill crawling under his skin. As he pulled onto the road out of town, the headlights swept across the snowbank where the figure had stood. Nothing there, no prints, no movement, no reason for his heart to pound the way it did. But Bruno kept staring through the back window, watching the forest shrink behind them. Not restless, not scared, waiting. Cole tightened his grip on the wheel. Whatever it is, it's over. We're done with this place. He didn't notice the faint reflection in the mirror, the shape slipping between two trees, following the road from a distance. But Bruno saw. He let out one more bark, low and sharp, a sound that felt almost like the beginning of something neither of them were ready for, a beginning hiding inside a winter that had already taken too much. And far behind them, deep in those mountains, something stirred, something that had been waiting 3 long years for someone to finally hear it. Cole didn't look back at the town as the truck climbed the sloping road towards the foothills. He knew if he did, he might turn around and let himself fall into the same loop of shame, pity, and half-hearted sympathy people offered when they didn't know what else to say. The mountains, at least, never lied to him. They took you as you were, broke what needed breaking, kept what deserved to stay. Bruno sat upright in the passenger seat, body as stiff as if he were back in uniform. Every few seconds he glanced over his shoulder, staring out the rear window. Not casual glances, tracking, calculating, listening. "You're not really going to do this the whole way?" Cole said. Bruno answered with a quiet rumble in his chest. No fear, just tension wound tight. The forest grew denser as they drove, the road narrowing into a strip of asphalt cracked from years of freeze and thaw. Patches of old snow clung to the shoulders, ghosting over the ground like forgotten footprints. Something about the air felt heavier now, a pressure he couldn't name. By the time they reached the old logging turnoff, the world had gone silent except for the engine and Bruno's breathing. Cole parked beneath a stand of aspen trees, their white trunks gleaming in the half-light. This was where he'd planned to stay for a while, long enough to figure out what was next, or what was left. Cole climbed out, stretching stiff muscles, but Bruno didn't jump down. He stayed in the truck bed, ears angled toward the trees as though listening to something Cole couldn't hear. "Bruno, down!" Nothing. "Down!" Cole repeated, sharper. Bruno finally obeyed, landing in the snow without a sound. But the moment his paws touched the ground, he spun towards the direction they'd come from, nose lifting, tail dropping low. His breath hit the cold air like a warning flare. Cole frowned. "It's just memories messing with you. Happens to me too." But Bruno wasn't remembering. He was reading the wind. His whole posture had changed, energy coiled like a spring. Cole tried distracting himself with practical things, setting up the tarp, unloading a few tools, checking his jacket for the 20th time. But Bruno wouldn't stop pacing the perimeter. Every few minutes the dog stopped dead, growled under his breath, then moved again. Something was wrong. Cole didn't want to admit it, but the dog had never been wrong about danger, not once, not in the years they'd worked together. Search and rescue dogs didn't guess. They read the world with instincts humans had forgotten how to use. By late afternoon, snow began to fall again, light but steady. Cole decided to check the old trail behind the clearing, partly to reassure himself, partly to calm Bruno down. The trail had been abandoned years earlier after a landslide made it unsafe, though locals still used the first mile for hunting. Bruno walked ahead of him, nose to the ground, steps careful but urgent. Every few yards he stopped, circled, sniffed deeper, then let out a quiet whine. Cole followed, watching the dog's movements sharpen with purpose. "What are you picking up?" Cole whispered, as if afraid to interrupt whatever language Bruno was listening to. The answer came 10 minutes later. Bruno halted so abruptly that Cole nearly stumbled into him. The snow here was untouched, smooth as cream. No animal trails, no boot marks. But Bruno pawed at the ground with a precision that wasn't random. Cole stepped closer and froze. There, half buried in the fresh powder, was a shoe print. Small, light, too small for a hunter, too narrow for a teenager in heavy boots. A child's print. Cole blinked hard, forcing himself to stay rational. No, impossible. The storm washed everything out last week. But the edges of the print were sharp, the impression clean. It had been made after the snowfall started, which meant someone small had been here within hours. He crouched, brushing snow away. The tread was worn at the toe. Kids' shoes wore down at the toe first. He knew because he'd analyzed hundreds during searches. Bruno let out a slow exhale, watching him carefully, waiting for him to understand. Cole swallowed. This can't be real. Then came the twist he didn't expect. Another print, and another, leading off the trail towards the dense spruce thicket. Not scattered, not wandering, a clear, deliberate path. 2 sets, Cole whispered. 2 kids. His blood ran cold. Emma and Lucas Parker had disappeared 3 winters ago. No trace, no evidence of them walking anywhere near this part of the forest. And now, here in front of him, were fresh prints matching kids their age. Bruno barked once, sharp and commanding, the kind of bark he used when he found a live scent during rescues. "Bruno, heel!" The dog didn't heel. "Bruno!" Bruno ignored him completely. He lunged into the trees, not blindly, not wildly, with purpose, with urgency, as if this was the moment he'd been waiting for since they left town. "Bruno, stop!" Bruno vanished between the branches. Cole cursed under his breath and sprinted after the dog, heart hammering, snow spraying around his boots. Because whatever Bruno had just sensed, whatever trail he'd picked up, it wasn't a false alarm. Not tonight, not in these mountains, and definitely not after 3 missing years. The forest swallowed sound the deeper Cole pushed into it. Branches clawed at his jacket. Snow cracked beneath every frantic step. Ahead, somewhere beyond the thick wall of spruce, Bruno's barks echoed once, then vanished. "Bruno, slow down!" No response, just the rhythm of the dog cutting through brush with a confidence born from instinct, training, and something more primal than either. Cole forced himself to steady his breathing. Panic never helped in the field. He had learned that the hard way during search and rescue missions. The moment your fear outran your focus, you made mistakes. Mistakes cost lives. Tonight the cold bit harder. Not from weather, from dread. The kid's footprints kept replaying inside his head. Fresh, clean, deliberate. There was no part of that detail he could rationalize away. Someone small had walked here recently, and Bruno had picked up a scent tied to something he remembered, something Cole had forced himself to forget. Bruno's barks returned, closer now, sharp, urgent. Cole pushed through the last row of trees and skidded to a stop. The clearing before him was one he hadn't seen in years. A jagged wall of stone rose from the earth like a broken tooth, half hidden by snowdrifts. 3 wooden warning signs lay scattered on the ground, their red paint faded or scraped away. The rope that once cordoned the area off after the Parker kids vanished had snapped, threads dangling uselessly in the wind. "Bruno, get back here." But the dog stood perfectly still near the base of the rock wall, nose pressed to a mound of snow. His tail was raised but not wagging. His stance was rigid, focused, working. Cole approached slowly, his pulse drumming at his throat. When he reached Bruno's side, the dog stepped back, as if making space for him to see. There, wedged between the snow and a tangle of dead branches, was a small coat. A child's coat. Red, with a faded patch of a cartoon fox near the chest. Cole crouched, his breath catching halfway. He reached out carefully, half expecting the fabric to crumble in his hand after so many winters. But when he lifted it, warmth clung to the lining. It was warm, recently worn. His stomach clenched. "Impossible," he whispered. Bruno whined softly, then nudged Cole's elbow, urging him to smell the spot beneath the coat. Cole leaned in, a faint trace of body heat. He could almost feel the outline of a small figure that had knelt there. This wasn't old evidence. This wasn't a ghost of the past. Someone had been here minutes ago. The coat slipped in Cole's grip as old guilt surged like a punch to the ribs. The Parker search had been the mission that broke him. 2 kids, 8 and 6, last seen near the trailhead. For weeks he'd walked miles of terrain, studied maps until his eyes bled, followed every lead. And still they vanished as if the mountains themselves had swallowed them whole. And now this, a coat too new, too warm. Bruno nudged him again, harder this time, not asking for attention, pushing him to keep moving. Cole stood, instincts kicking in. He scanned the rock face, tracing every line of snow, every shadow. Search and rescue training returned like muscle memory. He paced the clearing, analyzing brush patterns, avalanche debris, wind direction. Kids rarely moved in straight lines. They followed shelter, shadows, anything that felt like safety. But here, in this clearing, the snow told a different story. No wandering, no signs of panic. Just tracks straight toward the wall. Bruno moved before he did, circling the rock, nose dragging across stone. Then he stopped at a cluster of branches piled haphazardly against the face. Cole reached for them, tugged once, and the pile shifted too easily for natural fall. Someone had placed them here intentionally. He brushed aside the dead limbs and felt cold air rush over his face. A crack in the stone. A vertical slit barely wide enough for a grown man to slip through. Snow and branches had nearly sealed it, but not perfectly. A faint trail of scuff marks lined the rock edges. And inside, darkness breathed back. Cole stared at the opening, stunned. This wasn't here. They said the rockfall sealed everything. They swore it wasn't accessible anymore. Bruno barked once behind him. Cole turned. Bruno wasn't behind him. The dog stood at the mouth of the fissure, paws already on the stone edge, ears aimed into the darkness. His eyes held something unmistakable. Recognition, resolve, a duty he had never abandoned, even when Cole did. "No," Cole murmured. "Not yet. We don't know how deep it goes. It could be unstable. It could collapse. Bruno, stay." For the first time in years, Bruno disobeyed without hesitation. He stepped inside the crack. 1 heartbeat, 2 heartbeats. Then his entire body slipped into the dark, swallowed as if pulled by some unseen gravity. "Bruno!" Cole lunged forward, reaching for the dog's tail, his collar, anything. His fingers brushed empty air. Bruno was gone, his form already absorbed in blackness. The darkness answered with silence. Cole stared into the gap, pulse pounding. Bruno had followed dozens of trails in his life. He had never once entered a space he wasn't certain about. Never once gone into danger without signaling for Cole to follow first. Unless what he found wasn't danger. Unless what he found was alive. Cole pressed one hand to the cold stone wall, fear and adrenaline mixing in his veins. He leaned into the narrow opening, listening for movement, for breathing, for claws shifting on rock. Nothing. Just the quiet, ancient heartbeat of the mountain. Cole swallowed hard, then stepped into the darkness after his dog. The crack in the stone narrowed around Cole's shoulders as he squeezed inside, one hand on the wall, the other reaching ahead in the dark. The cold swallowed everything. Even his own breath felt muffled, as if the mountain didn't want to let any sound escape. "Bruno," Cole whispered. His voice bounced back in fragmented echoes. No answer. A faint scrape echoed deeper inside. Paw pads on stone. Bruno was still moving, too far ahead for comfort. Cole quickened his pace, ducking beneath a low ceiling of rock. The passage widened suddenly, opening into a long, natural tunnel that sloped downward, its floor uneven but walkable. His flashlight flickered to life, throwing a pale beam across the tunnel. Dust motes swirled like drifting ghosts. The walls were smooth in places, jagged in others, the kind of erosion that took decades, maybe centuries. He had been in caves before during rescue missions. None had felt like this. Something about the air was different. Not stale. Lived in. He kept moving, careful, scanning every inch. The temperature rose a few degrees the farther he went, a clue he didn't like. Warmth meant ventilation. Ventilation meant open space. Open space meant someone could survive here. He took another step and felt his boot crunch on something that wasn't stone. He lifted his foot and crouched down. A plastic hair clip. Purple. Glittery. The kind sold in dollar stores. The ground around it was freshly disturbed. Whoever had dropped it hadn't been gone long. The print next to it confirmed that. Small. Barely the size of Cole's palm. A child's track. Cole exhaled slowly. The memory hit before he could brace for it. A little shoe stuck in the mud. A blue mitten snagged on a branch. The smell of pine and storm rain on the day they called off the Parker search. The sound of a mother's scream collapsing into silence when the sheriff shook his head. He pressed his palm to the tunnel wall until the flashback loosened its grip. Not now. Not here. A bark shattered the quiet ahead. Short, sharp, imperative. "Bruno, I'm coming." Cole moved faster now. The tunnel curved, dipping into a space where the ceiling lifted high enough that the darkness above swallowed the beam of his flashlight. The echo of dripping water tapped from somewhere far off. The smell changed too. Less earth, more human. He swept the flashlight across the floor. A small metal lunchbox lay half open beside a smooth boulder. Cartoon rockets on the lid. Scratches that looked recent. Inside were crumbs of granola and what looked like a broken pencil. He lifted the box, feeling the faint warmth still trapped in the metal. Someone had held this minutes ago. A deeper unease crawled along his spine. This wasn't the hiding spot of a terrified runaway. This was lived in, organized, maintained. Bruno barked again. Closer this time. Cole followed the sound to an alcove in the rock. His beam found scrawls scraped into the stone wall. Shapes, stick figures, a sun, a house, a tall shape next to a small one. Some drawings carved with a tool, others smeared in charcoal. Kids had drawn these. Recently. Something metallic glinted near the floor. Cole picked it up. A flashlight, small, blue. The lens shattered. He turned it over. Fresh fingerprints smudged the casing. A faint warmth against his palm. His chest tightened. Warm objects. Fresh crumbs. Fingerprints. Bruno's tracking behavior. The footprints outside. This wasn't a burial site of memories. This was a shelter. Someone had been raising 2 children inside this cave. Bruno's shadow darted across the beam as he trotted out of a narrow side passage. His ears were up. His posture was tense but not afraid. He moved to Cole, bumped his leg once, then turned sharply as if urging him to follow deeper. "What did you find?" Bruno stepped back into the narrow passage. Cole scanned it. The walls tightened again, forming a second tunnel barely wide enough for him to fit. A faint trail of dirt led inside. Someone had walked this route over and over. The dog disappeared down it, nails clicking softly. "Bruno, slow down." Cole squeezed into the passage after him. Halfway through, the floor shifted under his boots. Not a natural slope this time. Something deliberately cleared. Someone had dragged rocks away here to form a smoother path. A person who expected small feet to walk behind them. The realization hit hard. Whoever brought the children into this mountain had not abandoned them. Someone was still taking care of them, feeding them, keeping them hidden. The question was who, and why. Cole pressed forward, heart hammering. The passage curved sharply, then widened into a chamber so dark even the flashlight beam struggled to reach the walls. He stepped inside carefully, scanning each corner. He saw it before his mind accepted it. A thin blanket spread across a shelf of rock. 2 small bowls stacked neatly beside it. A pair of socks hung over a stone outcrop, drying. A pile of branches arranged like kindling. A cup fashioned from a cut tin can. This wasn't makeshift. It was home. Bruno walked to the blanket and sniffed it deeply. Then he looked up at Cole with an expression that felt like confirmation. "They're alive. They were here." Cole crouched and touched the blanket. Warm. He shut his eyes for a moment, breath shaking. This place wasn't a tomb of regret or a monument to his failure. This was a trail. A pulse. A thread still running. The sound came when he least expected it. A footstep. Soft. Tiny. Barely a whisper of skin against stone. Cole's eyes snapped open. Bruno froze, head swiveling toward the darkness beyond the chamber. Cole lifted the flashlight, beam trembling slightly. Another footstep. Closer now. Light, cautious. The way a child might approach when they weren't sure if the person ahead was safe. Cole straightened slowly, pulse roaring in his ears. "Hello?" He called gently into the dark. Silence answered him. Then the unmistakable sound of small feet retreating deeper into the cave. Bruno lunged forward, barking once in warning. Cole's breath caught. They weren't alone, and whatever child was hiding in the darkness was still very much alive. Bruno's bark faded into a low, vibrating growl as Cole stepped toward the mouth of the inner passage. The cave felt alive now, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. Cole steadied the flashlight, angling the beam into the narrow throat of darkness where the footsteps had retreated. "Emma? Lucas?" he called softly. The names tasted like a myth. 3 years missing. 3 years gone. 3 years of winter storms, rescues, searches, and failures. But something in his chest sparked when he said their names aloud, a spark he hadn't felt in years. The silence stretched. Then 2 small shapes appeared from behind a stone outcrop. The girl stepped forward first. Thin, skittish, eyes wide with fear, and something sharper than fear, awareness. She clutched the hand of a boy half her size, his dirty blonde hair matted, his cheeks hollow, lips cracked from cold. Emma, 10 years old, Lucas, 8. Cole's breath caught. They were real. Alive, standing in front of him after 3 years underground. Bruno lowered his head but stopped growling. His tail held stiff, his muscles tight. Not out of threat, but readiness. He was waiting to see what these children needed from him. Cole crouched, keeping his voice soft. "I'm Cole. I'm here to help. I promise you're safe." But Emma shook her head violently. "No, we're not." Lucas hid behind her, trembling. "You didn't get lost," Cole said gently. "You came down here on purpose." Emma nodded once. "We weren't lost," she whispered. "We were hiding." Cole's stomach tightened. "Hiding from who?" Emma swallowed. "The man who brought us here." Lucas's voice cracked open in a small whisper. "He said the world outside was dangerous. He said people would try to hurt us. Cole's skin prickled. Where is he now? Emma's eyes drifted toward the back of the cavern. He went out yesterday. He said he was going to find food. He said he'd come back before dark. Lucas added, he said we're never supposed to talk to anyone else. Ever. Cole felt a pulse of anger under his ribs. Controlled, cold, focused. He kept it quiet. Is he the one who's been taking care of you? Cole asked. Emma hesitated, then nodded. He helped us when we fell. He fixed my ankle. He brought blankets. But sometimes he... She paused, voice tightening. Sometimes he changes. He gets angry. He says the forest talks to him. He says it tells him when bad people come. Cole breathed out slowly. Not a predator. Not some wild hermit stealing kids. Someone fractured. Someone unwell. Someone who believed he was saving them, even while hurting them. Emma reached into a small nook in the wall and pulled out a torn notebook page. Childlike handwriting covered it. Rules, schedules, chores, and one line underlined 3 times. Do not go outside. Cole scanned the chamber again. Now that he looked with this new understanding, the signs were everywhere. A military-grade ration box shoved behind a rock, a sharpened knife wedged in a crevice, the handle wrapped in old paracord, a length of rope tied neatly beside a crude wooden stool, boot prints larger than any child's. He moved the flashlight, and something metallic caught the edge of the beam. A dog tag. Cole reached for it, heart thudding. The name stamped on it. Walter Briggs, Army, discharged. He hadn't heard that name in years, but he remembered the file. A veteran who vanished 4 winters ago after a breakdown. Last seen near the forest. Declared missing, presumed dead. Not dead. Not gone. Down here, raising 2 children in a cave. Bruno stepped beside Cole and sniffed the dog tag, then huffed sharply as if recognizing the scent he'd been following all along. Emma clutched Lucas tighter. He said he'd come back before dark. If he sees you here, he'll think you're here to take us away. Cole kneeled lower. I'm here to bring you home. To your families. Emma's face twisted. We don't have families anymore. Yes, you do, Cole said, voice thickening despite himself. People have been searching for you for 3 years. They never stopped. Emma blinked twice, confusion warring with a flicker of hope. Before Cole could say more, Bruno suddenly snapped upright. His growl turned deep and guttural, reverberating off the cave walls like a warning bell. Emma flinched. He's back. Cole froze. What? He always walks that way. She pointed to the tunnel behind them. He drags his left foot when he's carrying gear. And then Cole heard it. A scraping sound. Slow, heavy, measured. Not a child's step. A man's, boot against stone, boot against snow. Coming closer. Bruno stood between the children and the tunnel, hackles rising, body lowering into a protective stance. His growl wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a promise. Cole rose slowly, gripping the flashlight tighter, pulse hammering. His mind raced through every rescue briefing, every tactical plan he ever learned. The children shrank behind him. Bruno's growl deepened. The footsteps grew louder. Someone was coming back into the cave, and this time, Cole knew exactly what his dog was telling him. They weren't alone, and whatever lived in this darkness was coming home. The footsteps grew sharper, echoing through the cave like a slow, deliberate warning. Cole positioned himself between the children and the narrowing tunnel. Bruno stood even closer, shoulders lowered, tail stiff, teeth bared but silent. A soldier's stance, a guardian's vow. Then the figure appeared. Walter Briggs stepped into the beam of Cole's flashlight. He looked nothing like the man Cole remembered from old search and rescue files. His beard was wild, flecked with grey, his coat patched with mismatched pieces of canvas and hide. One boot was wrapped with duct tape. but his eyes were the same as the photo from years ago. Sharp, intelligent, and fractured. "Who are you?" Walter rasped. His voice echoed off the stone walls, ragged from disuse. He glanced from Cole to the children behind him, then to Bruno, whose growl deepened. Cole raised both hands. "My name is Cole Marston. I'm not here to hurt you or the kids." Walter's entire frame tensed at the word kids. He stepped forward, gripping a handmade crossbow slung over his shoulder. "Step aside. They're scared. You're scaring them." Cole didn't move. "They're scared because they think they can't leave." Walter's jaw clenched. "They can't leave. It's not safe. Not up there. Not in that world." Emma whimpered behind Cole. Lucas pressed his face into her jacket. Walter's gaze snapped toward the sound. His expression softened in a way that struck Cole like a blow. This wasn't a captor looking at victims. This was a broken man looking at the only family he believed he had left. 3 years, Cole said quietly. 3 years they've been missing. Their parents, they never stopped searching. Walter flinched, his grip tightening. Lies, all lies. They were alone, cold, hurt. Nobody came for them except me. You saved them. I know that, Cole said. But saving isn't the same as keeping. Walter's breath hitched, the words landing like a strike he wasn't ready for. He staggered a half-step back. You weren't there. You didn't see them. They were dying. I believe you, Cole replied. But the world outside didn't stop. It didn't give up. Their names are still spoken every week in town. That seemed to shake Walter more than anything so far. He aimed the crossbow. Not with malice, with desperation. No, he whispered, voice trembling. If you take them out, the world will chew them up again. I won't let that happen. I won't lose them. Cole didn't breathe. The air between them tightened, stretched thin as wire. Walter, Cole said gently, you're not their enemy. But you can't be their prison, either. Walter's eyes flicked downward, to Emma, to Lucas, to Bruno. And in that instant of uncertainty, the crossbow jerked in his shaking hands. The trigger clicked. Cole didn't have time to move. Bruno did. The shepherd lunged with a force that split the air, slamming his shoulder into Cole's chest just as the bolt fired. It scraped past Cole's arm and buried into the rock with a metallic snap. Walter stumbled at the recoil, slipped on loose stones, and fell backward toward a steep drop between rock shelves. Cole crashed to the ground with Bruno sprawled across him, the dog's body shaking but uninjured. The crossbow bolt had grazed Bruno's flank, not pierced it. Bruno pushed himself upright, growling louder now, furious that harm had even come close. Walter! Cole scrambled to the edge. Walter Briggs hung by one hand, boots kicking against the cliff face inside the cavern. His fingertips scraped desperately at the stone, panic flooding his face. Don't let me fall! Don't let me! Walter gasped. I didn't mean to hurt them. Cole could have stepped back, could have waited, could have ended it right there. But he didn't. He grabbed Walter's wrist with both hands. You're not dying today, Cole said through clenched teeth. We're done losing people in these mountains. Walter's eyes flicked upward, shock breaking through the panic. Why would you save me? Because those kids deserve the truth. Cole growled, not another ghost. He hauled Walter upward, muscles screaming, boots slipping on the stone. Bruno braced himself beside Cole, body pressed against Cole's hip for leverage. Together, they dragged Walter back onto solid ground. Walter collapsed on his knees, breathing in ragged, shuddering bursts. His hands trembled violently, his eyes glistened, and then something cracked open inside him. Not anger, not fear, recognition. For the first time in years, the fog of his trauma broke just enough for him to see what he'd become. I wasn't trying to hurt them, Walter whispered, voice breaking. "I swear, I thought I was, keeping them safe." Emma stepped forward. "We know," she said softly, her voice shaking. "But we're tired, Walter. We want to go home." Walter pressed his palms to his face and sobbed. A deep, guttural cry, years in the making, echoing through the cave walls like a man finally waking from a long, punishing dream. Bruno lay down beside him, placing one paw gently on the man's boot, guarding not against him, but with him. For the first time, Walter didn't pull away. Outside, distant thunder rolled over the mountains. Inside the cave, the truth hung heavy. This was never a story of a monster. It was a story of someone who broke trying to protect what he loved. And now, finally, he was ready to let them go. Snow was beginning to fall again by the time Cole guided Emma and Lucas out of the cave. The world outside looked brighter than it had hours before, though nothing in the sky had changed. It was the air around them, the shift, the release. Like the mountain itself exhaled when those children stepped back into daylight. Bruno limped at Cole's side, favoring the flank where the bolt had grazed him. Still, he held his head high. His ears tracked everything. His posture remained protective. If pain bothered him, he didn't let it interrupt his job. Cole knelt and checked the wound again. "You're tough, buddy, but you're bleeding more than you should." Bruno nudged Cole's chin once, stubborn and steady, as if telling him he'd worry about himself later. Right now, the kids came first. Walter followed behind, his steps slow, almost hollow. The crossbow hung lifeless in his hand, the string broken. Years of fear and delusion seemed to sag off him like a heavy coat slipping from his shoulders. At the tree line, a voice cracked through the quiet. "Cole Marston, step forward with your hands where I can see them." Sheriff Layla Grant emerged from the snow-dusted pines with 2 deputies behind her. For a moment, Cole tensed, instinct reacting before logic. Then he recognized her. Layla. He hadn't seen her since before he left town, before everything fell apart. She lowered her weapon first, and then she froze. Her gaze moved from Cole to Emma, to Lucas. Her breath hitched audibly. Her hand came up to her mouth. It was the kind of reaction that didn't come from duty. It came from memory. "You've got to be kidding me," she whispered, voice strangled. "You found them." Her deputies stared in disbelief. One crossed himself, the other muttered something like a prayer. Layla walked forward slowly, as if afraid the children might vanish if she blinked too fast. "Emma, Lucas." Her voice broke. "Sweet God, I'm so sorry." Emma reached for her with the hesitance of someone who had forgotten what safety was supposed to look like. Layla lowered herself to one knee in the snow, tears gathering. "I led the search 3 years ago," Layla said softly to Cole without looking away from the children. "I called it off on day 9. I told their families we'd done everything we could." Guilt wasn't strong enough a word for what was written on her face. Emma touched her shoulder. "You didn't know. Nobody did." Layla nodded once, swallowing hard. Then her eyes shifted past them, to Walter. The deputies stiffened immediately, reaching for restraints. Cole stepped in front of Walter. "Easy, he's not what you think." Layla's expression sharpened, but not with anger, with weariness, with experience. "Then tell me." So Cole did. Not all at once, not with blame, not with excuses. Just the truth. About the storm 3 years ago, about Walter finding the children broken and alone, about his delusions growing stronger, about how survival had twisted into captivity, not from cruelty, but from trauma. Layla listened without interruption. When Cole finished, Walter stepped forward with his hands raised, eyes hollow but clear. "I didn't mean to hurt them," he said quietly. I thought I was saving them. I thought the world was the threat. Layla studied him. Then she nodded once. Walter Briggs, she said, you're coming with us, but you're not being charged with kidnapping. You're being placed under psychiatric protective care until doctors determine the level of your trauma. Walter blinked, confused. You're not locking me up? You already locked yourself up. Layla replied gently. Now we're going to help you get out. Walter's knees nearly buckled. Cole caught him with one arm. For the first time, the man looked relieved. He gave Cole a shaky nod. Emma and Lucas watched it all unfold with wide, silent eyes. Layla turned to them. Your parents are on their way. They never stopped searching for you. Lucas whispered, They're still alive. Layla's lips trembled. And they've been waiting for you every day. Emma burst into tears. Lucas clung to her. Layla didn't try to break the moment. She simply placed a hand on each of their shoulders, grounding them. Then she looked at Cole. You did this, she said. You found what every team in this county missed. Cole shook his head. No, he did. Bruno stood beside him, panting lightly, ears perked despite the pain. Layla knelt beside the shepherd, examining the wound. He needs stitches. I'll get a medic. Bruno didn't flinch, but his tail thumped once at her calm voice. Good boy, she murmured. Within the hour, medics wrapped Bruno's flank and loaded Walter carefully into a patrol truck, blankets draped over him. Emma and Lucas were brought to a heated ambulance, wrapped in thick coats, offered warm drinks with trembling hands. Reporters would soon hear the story. Headlines would explode. But right now, in this moment, it was just relief, quiet and raw and overwhelming. Layla approached Cole again. Cole Marston, I don't know what brought you up this mountain today, but you changed the course of 3 lives. Cole looked at Bruno. I didn't come up here to be a hero. Layla smiled gently. Heroes rarely do. He scratched behind Bruno's ears. The dog leaned into him with full trust. The snow softened around them, falling slower now. The kind of snow that came after a storm had finally passed. Cole exhaled for the first time in years. Justice had begun. Healing, too. For the kids, for Walter, for Bruno, and maybe, if he let it, for himself. 3 days after the rescue, the mountain was no longer a crime scene, no longer a battlefield of fear and instinct. It was just a mountain again. Snow softened the broken trail, and wind erased footprints that had changed lives. Cole stood outside the temporary shelter the town had offered him, tightening the strap on his pack. The morning light spilled over the rooftops of Silverton, bright and sharp, as if the world had decided to start over. He intended to do the same. Come on, Bruno, he called quietly. Bruno limped out from beside the porch, his flank neatly stitched, bandage clean, posture steady. Despite the injury, he walked with the same unwavering determination he had in the cave. The stitches hadn't dimmed the spark in his eyes. If anything, they made him look even more like the warrior he was. Cole rested a hand on his head. We're almost out of here. Few miles north, maybe find a quiet ridge to stay a while. He said it with certainty, but the truth was softer, a little cracked. He didn't want to leave. Not entirely. But leaving was what he did best. Before the divorce, before losing the job, before the cave. Leaving felt easier than answering questions he didn't want asked. As he slung the pack over his shoulder, a familiar voice called from behind him. You planning to disappear without saying goodbye? Cole turned. Emma and Lucas stood with their parents on the sidewalk. The family looked whole in a way they hadn't in years. Emma's cheeks were fuller, color returning to her face. Lucas clutched a stuffed bear someone from the sheriff's office had given him. Their parents looked exhausted, yet alive in a new way. Emma stepped forward. "You saved us," she said. "You can't just leave." Cole rubbed the back of his neck. "You don't owe me anything." "We know." Emma's mother approached, eyes warm but firm. "Which is exactly why we want to help." Lucas piped up. "We got you a house." Cole blinked. "A what?" Their father laughed nervously. "Not a house. A trailer. The community pitched in. Sheriff Grant organized it. It's old, but solid. Needs some fixing. Thought maybe you could do that better than any of us." Cole stood speechless. Emma looked up at him. "You don't have to sleep in your truck anymore." His throat tightened. He hadn't cried once during the rescue. Not when he found the kids. Not when he pulled Walter off the cliff. Not when Bruno took the bolt meant for him. But now, as a 10-year-old girl held out a key attached to a plastic blue tag, he felt something crack open. He took the key slowly. "Thank you," he said, voice hoarse. "You earned it," Emma whispered. Before he could respond, a sheriff's SUV pulled up. Sheriff Layla Grant stepped out, hat tucked under her arm, coat unbuttoned against the cold. "You heading out?" she asked. That was the plan. Plans can change. Cole raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Layla crossed her arms, studying him the same way she had in the forest, measuring not his past, but his potential. "County Search and Rescue is rebuilding its volunteer roster. After what happened, we could use someone with your instincts, someone like you." She nodded toward Bruno. "Someone like him." Bruno perked up at the sound of his name. Cole shifted his weight. "I'm not the man I used to be." Layla stepped closer. "Maybe not, but from what I've seen, you're better than the man you used to be." Silence hummed between them. Then Cole let out a breath. "I'll think about it." "That's all I'm asking." Layla tipped her hat and walked back toward her SUV. As she drove off, a small group of townspeople gathered nearby. People who had donated money, offered blankets, prayed during the search years ago. They waved. Some clapped softly, unsure if applause was appropriate, but needing to express gratitude anyway. Cole wasn't used to being seen like this, not as a liability, not as a failure, but as someone who mattered. Bruno nudged his leg, sensing his hesitation. His tail wagged once, slow and steady, the kind of wag he reserved only for pivotal moments. Cole knelt beside him, stroking the fur behind his ears. "You ready to settle down for once? Just a little?" Bruno huffed, as if amused by the question. Together, they walked across town toward the trailer lot. Snow crunched under their boots and paws. A new beginning waited just ahead. Something small, something simple, something earned. When they arrived, the trailer sat under a wide pine, silver paint worn but intact. Someone had hung a small wooden plaque beside the door. It read, "Home is anywhere you're found." Bruno trotted up the steps and sat proudly on the top one, surveying the lot like he'd been assigned to guard it for life. Cole laughed under his breath. "So this is home now, huh?" Bruno didn't move. Later, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Cole sat on the steps with Bruno beside him, both of them watching the sky shift colors. For the first time in years, Cole felt something like peace. A soft wind rustled the pines. Bruno's ears twitched. He turned his head towards the mountains. But not with alarm, not with instinctive warning. Just a steady, thoughtful gaze. A dog looking back at the place where everything changed. Where he had been tested. Where he had saved not just 2 children, but his human too. Cole rested a hand on his back. "It's all right," he murmured. "We're safe now." Bruno exhaled, calm and certain. The mountains no longer called for help, only for remembrance. 1 year later, the mountains felt different. Not quieter, not safer, just more honest. Snowmelt ran down the slopes, and the pines swayed like they finally recognized Cole Marston again. Cole stood at the training field behind the county fire station, watching a circle of teenagers kneel beside their assigned rescue dogs. He wore a SAR jacket now, faded at the seams, comfortable on his shoulders. He hadn't planned on staying in Silverton, but somehow the town had become the only place that made sense. "Eyes up, pay attention to their posture," Cole called out as a boy fumbled with his dog's harness. "They speak long before they make a sound." Behind him, Bruno sat like a king surveying his kingdom. His muzzle had more grey now, but his eyes had lost none of their fire. Kids practically orbited around him. He tolerated every pat, every hug, every clumsy attempt to feed him pretzels. He had become the heart of the team, the old dog who saw through storms and secrets. Emma and Lucas arrived after school, backpacks bouncing, cheeks flushed from the cold. They ran straight to Cole, waving stapled pages like a victory flag. "We got an A," Emma announced, breathless. Cole took the papers. At the top was the title, "The Hero Who Never Spoke. The Dog Who Saved Our Lives." He swallowed hard as he read. They wrote about the cave and the fear, about the man who rescued them, but mostly they wrote about the dog, the one who refused to leave the truth buried. At the end, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Bruno didn't bark for danger. He barked for the truth." Bruno nudged Cole's leg, sensing the shift in his breathing. Cole placed a hand on the dog's head, steady and grateful. "Yeah," he whispered. "You always did." Chapter 10. Signature Ending and CTA. The year-end sun fell soft over the ridge, throwing long gold shadows across the training field. Cole sat on the porch steps of the SAR station, an old denim jacket around his shoulders. Bruno lay at his feet, muzzle silvered, eyes bright as ever. Age had slowed his stride, not his vigilance. A young reporter adjusted her recorder, cleared her throat, and asked the final question of the day. "Do you think Bruno knew the kids were alive that first day?" Cole looked down. Bruno met his gaze with the same steady fire he'd carried into that cave a year ago. Snow whispered across the far pines, but for a moment everything was still. "He didn't bark for food," Cole said softly. "He barked for what the rest of us couldn't see." The reporter lowered her microphone. Bruno shifted, lifted his head to the mountains, and let out a single short bark. Not a warning, not a call, just a full stop at the end of a long, hard sentence. Cole rested a hand on the dog's back. That's his way of saying we're done here. But the truth was they weren't done. Not really. Not as long as there were people missing, trails unexplored, storms rolling in, or someone waiting in the dark hoping to be found. Bruno had become the symbol of that hope. And now it was your turn to carry it. What's your story with a loyal pet? Share it below. Someone out there might need to hear it, and if you believe in courage with 4 legs and a heartbeat, support this channel. More stories, more truth, more heroes like Bruno.